I don't know. Somebody might say no. And now we are recording. So, hello, welcome to TGI, originally, The Great Indoors, and then it turns out there's like 9 other things called that. So we had to change it. Um, I like to claim that we changed it to this, and now I can say whatever it stands for. Like I can just make something up every week. So I've been saying things like trapezoid guerrilla infantry or tuna growth immersion. I don't think this joke is really working though, so I'm going to stop doing it. Anyways, my name is Ridge Cresswell. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an audiobook narrator, voice person, Juliet, thank you. The gooey infiltration. Yes. Um, where was I? Oh, me. Yeah. Hi. I normally live in Queens, New York, but because of coronavirus, we have largely been coming to you from a very small town in northeastern Connecticut, which is where we started this show. I believe in the coming weeks, we will return to New York. Those of you who saw last week's show, we were in Queens, and I kept saying how weird I was, and Trina told me afterwards that I did not actually appear any weirder than normal. So I'm not going to make any excuses for my behavior or anything tonight. The only other notes I will give everybody is that we are best found on Twitter at TGIcast. You can also find a podcast of the same name at anchor.fm/TGIcast. I can send all these links out into the chat at the end of this. And basically what we were saying right beforehand is that this whole thing started as a place for writers, creators in general. We have had 2 visual artists through screen sharing, which I hope to do more of at some point in the future. Started as a place for people to be able to have some sort of sense of community when that idea of a community based on a bunch of people traveling to the same place or based on things other than like the basic needs of life has become very difficult because of this virus. So Trina had the brilliant idea to start this, and then because of my tone of voice and my ability to extemporaneously pontificate to a great degree, I have been made the host. So the way this works essentially is we have 4 readers tonight. They will each read some of their work for 10 or 15 minutes. I will come back on. I may have feedback. I may have a reaction. I may have a question. It started as just a way to segue from one writer to another, and pretty much remains a way to segue from one writer to another, if I'm honest. So without further ado/nonsense, I think we should begin. So our first writer is Deirdre Fagan. She is a widow, wife, mother of 2, and associate professor and coordinator of creative writing in the English Literature and World Languages Department at Ferris State University in Michigan. Fagan is the author of a chapbook of poetry, Have Love, published by Finishing Line Press, a forthcoming collection of short stories, The Grief Eater, by Adelaide Books, and a reference book, Critical Companion to Robert Frost, published by Facts on File. Her poem Outside In was a finalist for Best of the Net 2018, and her poem Homesick was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She's currently seeking publication for a full-length collection of poetry and a memoir. She's a native New Yorker who completed her doctorate at the University of Albany and her undergrad education at University of Buffalo. She's previously lived in Arizona, Maryland, Florida, and Illinois, and you can find out more about her at, and I'm going to put this into the chat, DeirdreFagan.com. So Deirdre, there you are. I'm going to unmute you and you can take it away.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to mute my computer. There we go. Can you still hear me okay? Great. All right, well, I want to thank Ridge and Trina and Noli for this opportunity. So happy to see so many faces here, and I see some friends popping on still. I'm going to read from the chapbook Have Love, recently published by Finishing Line Press. I'm going to read from the beginning through to the end, a selection of poems so that you get a sense of the narrative arc of the chapbook. And the book is very much about love, loss, going on when, even if reluctantly, and new love. So the first poem is a love poem. It's titled The Trouble with Pears. And that's P-A-I-R-S. The trouble with pears, I want to be inside of you. No, not like that. I want to unzip you and climb inside. Big toe first, then a dipping of my head until I'm fully upright and enclosed in your dark. Your sinews and synapses making room for all of me. I don't want to meet where lips meet anymore, or where parts may be joined, but inevitably part. I want to get inside so far there is no getting out, where two truly are one and departure becomes impossible. Close is never close enough, and isn't that the trouble with pairs? This next one is titled, While Your Husband is Still Able to Stand. And I'm going to repeat the title because it flows into the first line. While your husband is still able to stand, you fasten the tabs by reaching around from behind, and your wrist is tickled by his hairy middle while you lean in, close your eyes, and pause to smell the skin on his back. When your husband tells you to call what he's been wearing diapers, because that's what they are, you do. His head lowers as you finish the job. When you get groceries, he encourages you to take your time, enjoy being without him, not to rush home. He is clean, he will be fine. No matter how many times you tell him it doesn't matter to you, you will be unable to unburden him. Upon learning as you set down the groceries, he has called an aide instead of you, a gift to you, the way he used to do the vacuuming or bring you flowers, your own head will lower. You will place the ice cold coffee you have brought him beside his chair and thank him for being alive. This next one, I want to issue a trigger warning on the topic of suicide. And I'm going to take a quick drink. It's titled Most of the Days of the Week. On Monday, you make pancakes, pay the bills, clean the floor, wipe down the counters, and begin chopping vegetables for soup. As the knife slices the onion thin, you peel away its outer layer and consider committing seppuku at noon. On Tuesday, you start the crock pot, dust the blinds, rake the leaves, strip the beds, and carry the laundry downstairs. You put the wash on delicate, cold, and as you turn to go upstairs to the hum of the washer balancing its own mind, you longingly consider freshly washed, warmed, and crisp sheets tied gracefully around a rafter and your neck. Those beams appear strong. Wednesday, after tucking the kids into bed and starting the dishwasher, you wash your face, brush and floss your teeth, and line every pill bottle in the medicine cabinet up on the bathroom counter before considering what they will find in the morning. Then you carefully place the bottles back in the cupboard, turn out the lights, and climb into bed yourself after checking the breaths of your children. Thursday night, you have a little bit too much to drink. Some wine, several beers, rum, and a hot cup of tea. Then you remember something Nietzsche said about thoughts of suicide getting many through a dark night. This week you've made it 3.5 days, but it isn't the weekend yet. You aren't sure if N is right, but you know you can't drink the antifreeze. Friday, you go out for groceries and consider high speed, a curve, a tree, or maybe that bridge over there. But you probably wouldn't even be successful. And then what a mess you'd make. No one would be there to clean it up. And the kids, who would make them breakfast? Saturday, you roll over to turn off the alarm, but there isn't one. A blessing. Shortly thereafter, there are kids on top of you, climbing over you, giggling, offering to get you coffee, begging for eggs and bacon, and you make your way to the kitchen. When the grease in the bacon pan begins to sizzle, You don't imagine dousing yourself in it or starting a grease fire. Instead, you serve up breakfast and sip your coffee, admiring the life you have created, the one still in the making. This one is titled Doorbell Advised. In aisle 5, they sell wireless doorbells with a 150-foot range. Battery life, 3 years for chime, 2 years for buttons for your new home in this old house. So your husband waits while your legs take you to the world to get one. It had never before occurred to either of you that you would need one. The old one rang just fine for the house. It wasn't until 10 years into the marriage that his muscles began failing, and not long after that, the glass bell could no longer be rung with a twist of his wrist that it was advised. Upon your return, your own wrist deftly maneuvers with a knife the relentless plastic packaging, freeing the 2 buttons and the receiver you hope will save you both from fear and further incapacitation. You have a dozen choices for chimes: foghorn, steam engine, church bell, the buzzer that sounds on a game show answer gone wrong. Last time he cried out for you, you were upstairs, crying into the phone. You didn't hear him, not at first, and then you did, and there he was, down those many stairs and through the kitchen, straddling the tub, having begun to fall when he turned from the john, having caught himself between the legs 10 minutes before, and still unable to get up. You hadn't known. You hadn't heard. His voice having already grown faint. Now when the foghorn blows, you are assured you will descend. You will right him when he tips or falls between the bed and the wall again. You will remain his loving sentinel. You will cradle what remains of all 200 pounds of him, folded into you the way he has before folded all 3 of you into his chest, until the day he cannot ring. First, the depression of the button asking too much, and then life itself. And the silenced buttons and this receiver are put away in his drawer, in the bedside table, on his side of now only your bed. And once you move to where the children will learn to play again, one button will be placed in the kitchen and another next to your new marriage bed in an again new home with a new husband, and you will ring the children instead. And they will respond in harmony with gleeful anticipation. Foghorn, steam engine, church bell, the buzzer that sounds on all game shows gone wrong. And only you will bear the difference and shudder from the ignorance of just how long these new batteries can last. Just a couple more. I have a short one, and then an even shorter one. So this one is near the close of the book, and it's titled In Memoriam. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen is the thing that already has. When the worst thing that can happen does happen, you think the decks are cleared, but they're not. There is a worse thing, always a worse thing. Rather than anticipate its arrival or recall the last quake, stir the soup, light the candle, wash your face. Call your mother, your wife, your daughter, the neighbor. Call the one or two you've got left, then eat. And a playful one, a lighter one to end on. This one is titled Bartering in Michigan. Sometimes you barter a trombone for a pickup. Sometimes it's a fixed vacuum for a six-pack. We barter in any relationship. I bartered with you 2 kids, a dog, 1 dead husband, 2 ex-husbands, you, 1 ex-wife, a few girlfriends. When a six-pack is equal to a fixed vacuum, you are good to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Deirdre. Those were incredible.
Thank you.
I saw a lot of comments going on in the chat just about the raw, sort of honest, straightforward nature, especially of the poem that was in the second person. Really the experience of caring for someone who is, their health is deteriorating, and how you sort of balance their needs with yours, right? And these things that you all, one of the hardest experiences of grief, I think, is the stuff that's around afterwards. And, we're talking about the doorbell, and also just the way you evoked, the room where the children will learn to play again one day. Like these are just like these little nuggets that really perfectly articulate the experience of loss. And, really sort of, I talk a lot on this show, and you may well have heard about how I don't quite have the technical language for it, but poetry often reaches sort of in behind me and suddenly sort of pokes me in a spot I wasn't expecting. And I kind of got that over and over and over again. I mean, very quickly on when you were reading, especially particularly the one with reference to, suicidal thoughts. I was like, how do I respond to this without just talking about my own experience very explicitly? And I guess what I would say is, I just love that people are working with these feelings, because in this country, there are a lot of negative things, and in the world, there's a lot of, loss and death and difficulty, and also happiness and Saturday morning breakfast and everything. And we tend to pretend that there should only be Saturday morning breakfasts. So thank you very much for sharing. I mean, that's some really raw stuff. This chapbook's available now?
Yes.
Okay.
It came out, I received my copies in December, so it was just available a few months before the pandemic, and
okay.
So it's out there. It's on Finishing Line and Amazon and the usual places, Powell's.
Okay, perfect. So people should pick up a copy of that from the bookstore of their choice, and they can find out more, I'm sure, about that at your website as well, correct?
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, sure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we really appreciate your frequent attendance and participation in the before show and after show discussions, and convincing your children to get off the Wi-Fi so you can talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Well, and I also wanted to just jump on and say happy belated birthday to Ridge. So
thank you.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I did it. Thank you, Deirdre. All right. I don't want to talk too much about my birthday, but that's okay. I did have one. We can talk about it after, but I appreciate the shout out. All right. Our next reader, that threw me off. It's so funny. You can talk to me about like loss and grief and all these things, and then someone wishes me happy birthday. I'm like, where am I? What am I doing? It probably says something about my psyche, but that's okay. All right. Our next reader is Mark Steinwachs. Steinwachs. He was born in Buffalo, New York, and lives in Sarasota, Florida, with his partner and their schnauzer mutt, Leo. His stories have appeared in Cut, Bank, and Tampa Review, received a Pushcart Prize special mention, and been made into a short film by Bounder Productions. He's a contributing editor at Story Magazine and has been spending lots of time at home. Mark, you are unmuted. Take it away.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to read a short story, and it's called Endgame. If you could change one thing, make it that perfect night in spring. You're a junior in Firestone, engaged in your own version of cruising. Last stall, men's room, B floor. Middle of the semester, and you're sitting in your underwear with your jeans puddled at your ankles, waiting for someone to tap his shoe in the next stall while your own topsiders remain planted on the tile. You've been trolling since fall, setting the bait but never tugging the line when someone bites. Tonight, the first one is a regular. rust-colored Doc Martens so overeager in their tapping that the left one nearly crosses under the partition. You're not out to anyone. You're scarcely out to yourself. But if being gay means being this desperate, you would rather be celibate. You prefer the tragic ache of making contact without actually interacting. Like the time that handsome jock accidentally knocked your coffee down the steps of Murray Dodge and said, "Are you okay, man?" He seemed contrite and probably meant to be kind, but you only nodded without answering, rushed home to beat off to the memory of him, turned him into an object that could not exploit your secrets. Curly blonde hair, orange soccer shorts, bright green eyes, calves like bowling pins, freckled biceps. You have a paper due tomorrow and a final lab report. You consider leaving, but then the door croaks open and someone sits in the stall beside yours in a pair of blue canvas brogans with leather toe caps. You've never seen this pair before. Their owner slips down his pants and sits without pissing. You lean down for a better look at his cuffs, and your heart leaps to find the ankles bare, the feet sockless. You like this one. And when he taps his left foot, you feel as if whatever force controls your fate has called your bluff after months of deciding this one was too restless, that one's shoes were too cheap. The tap is delivered in such a slow, gentlemanly manner that for the first time in your life, you're tempted to tap back. His discretion is the ultimate turn on. He taps again, softer this time, and rather than dishonor him by clearing your throat or shifting your weight to make him tap a third time, you flush and walk out and wait in the stacks to get a good look at him. In the social science section, the gap between the tipping point and talking to strangers offers a partial view of the men's room door. You've never stalked anyone like this before. You feel like a child holding your hand over a burner and bringing your palm a perceptible degree closer. It does not take long for the man to emerge. You get a glimpse of a blue button-down, a rolled sleeve, a spotted forearm, and from this you conclude he is handsome and strong. He moves to the stairwell and you follow. You've never knowingly met a gay man before, never seen one outside the furious martyrs on the news and flaming queens on television. The idea of one more you out there, someone who's a homo but does not act like one, sends you up the stairs and after him. His heels strike the treads like drum beats and fade at ground level. You're half a flight behind, wanting to see but not be seen, and he's winding through the card catalog when you reach the main floor. His back is wide, his torso tapered. He clips a card catalog with his elbow and you're tempted to let him go. You already have enough masturbation material to last the rest of the semester, but you've caught the thread of something and can't resist the urge to pull. He runs his fingers through his tangled hair in a way that makes you wonder whether you know him from somewhere. He reminds you of the jock outside Murray Dodge, but then you've been fantasizing about that boy for so many months, you've probably forgotten how he looks. In a school of 6,000, you've only seen him once. But one time is enough when you pull down your shorts and replay that tiny moment to savor its lonesomeness. In circulation, the night librarian is checking out books for a girl in a camisole and sweatpants, but after midnight, the patrons are scant. Through the entrance doors, your man goes, and through the same glass doors, you follow. The air is crisp after a long and desolate winter. Clouds cover the moon and wash his body in shadow as he walks past the chapel. You have never been with a man before, never held another man's hand with affection, but this is the kind of man you should go for. From this distance, you admire his patrician bearing and casual posture. He crosses the quad to Murray Dodge, where late night coffee is sold. And for all the world, you're not following him anymore. You're getting coffee and he might happen to be there. Your heart gallops as his footsteps echo your own. He climbs the steps where you first met soccer jock, and you wonder at the eerie symmetry between this moment and that. You don't have an end game. But you suppose you can always bail as you have bailed before. Bailed on every girl who showed the slightest interest. Bailed on those men in the toilets. He is at the landing now, in 3/4 profile, and like a wish being answered, it's soccer jock. He does not look the way you remember. His shoulders are slumped and his face is stricken. He's not the shallow bro you've been imagining, and whatever sadness plagues him is your fault as much as anyone's. You have cruised in bad faith. You have left him hanging. The coffee bar is packed, but he does not seem to know anyone. He's alone in line with one server working both the register and the gleaming machines. You stand behind him, holding your breath, as though you could suspend yourself in time. You have this one chance, this briefest moment. You can say hello, or you can find yourself in a dive bar in Ocala 30 years from now, with your wife on vacation and nothing but bathhouses and video rooms in your future, when all the good men are taken or cheating or only looking for a casual hookup. You've never been this close to saying, "This is who I am," and you will not be for more than half your life. If future you could whisper in your ear, he would say, "The homework can wait. Stay in line." Tap his shoulder, look in those bright green eyes and ask, "Are you okay?" Then wait for an answer.
Wow. Mark, thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
So evocative of the strength of desire at that age. I think was the thing that struck me the most, is like there's a sort of you know, the parts I can identify with, you know, my experience, there was a sort of insanity inherent in sexual attraction at that age, I think. And to pile on top of that, you know, the issue of someone's sexuality being, you know, societally unacceptable or personally unacceptable to themselves, whatever it is, I think, you know, you did a really good job of really walking us through that internal conflict, and showing how the desire and the vague understanding of being true to yourself, even if, you know, this, you know, the character spoken about doesn't exactly know what that means yet, being just a hair stronger than everything that's holding him back, really like taking I think someone just said in the chat, suspenseful, and taking something that maybe you wouldn't normally think of as being suspenseful, but really being like, come on, please make the right decision. Please make the right decision. I wanted to, is this based on any experience of your own, or is this just sort of more a fiction or a way to talk about this?
It's definitely fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not an experience completely unknown to me, but
sure, yeah.
It's definitely, I think the truest thing is about the scraps that you can live on, you know, when there really isn't much to live on, but you can sort of, how you can sort of still do it, you know.
Sure, if you don't, you know, if you're not completely open and you don't have a community necessarily, you know, you mentioned these little moments that he is going to take back, and I forget the exact phrase, something about like revel in the loneliness of.
It kind of becomes like the thing more than, you know, if you can't have consummation, the lack of consummation is like its own thing, the kind of relish. Mm-hmm. You know, that comes with a cost, you know, you do that long enough and you pay a price for it, but that's sort of, you know, it's what you have. So it's what you hold close.
Sure. And in a lot of ways, you know, in any relationship or any, even pursuit, sometimes it can be sort of more comforting to have the fantasy and not have to take that leap and just be able to be like, well, I can sort of experience, and not knowing at the time, of course, you're not experiencing it at all. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That was really, really powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right. Moving forward, our next reader is Caprice Carvin. She has an MFA from Sarah Lawrence, and her poetry can currently be found on Glass, a Journal of Poetry, Poets Resist series, the New Verse News, as well as on her website, capricecarvin.com, which I will post into the chat. And she also has poetry forthcoming in Lily Poetry Review. Oh, I muted you because you had already unmuted yourself. I apologize. You can unmute yourself once again. We were speaking before the show, and I told you something would go wrong. So here we go. All right, take it away, Caprice.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you everyone for coming out on a Friday night to see this. It's so wonderful. I'll be reading 3 poems tonight. The first is Friendship Park. Friendship Park. On this plaza bordering San Diego and Tijuana, a mother and daughter touch fingertips through thick steel mesh. A rustling like ribbons wind-blown from a child's hair storms up the bars, confounding the wall's height. Trash undone by festival goers' hands rises as kites. The child doesn't turn to see Cardin feather into a bird, but sees flight in her mother's eyes and believes it real. She asks for wings, planes, a swing to swing that high. The steel catches the light of the sun, becomes a river on a kite's tail, saturates the air with the sound of fingertips brushing like palm leaves the underside of grace. A meat packer's supplication. Never can I return to that unholy shape. Hunched, hands slipping beneath skin of lamb. The corpse lies like wax in the ear. Our hands are deep in the unhearing. Fingers tread the crushed skull's drowning place, fingers sifting cartilage, organs snaking through. We do not choose our own placement. Tissue, cells, molecules, laying elbow to elbow on the conveyor belt. The meat comes through our fingers. These warehouse walls impersonate mountains. They keep out the mountains and the voice calling down. I would give my life for a vulture, to see the arc of one tracing the arc of my eye, to see that faintest movement at the edge, to know there is something farther. I know what it is to hear the last stream crackling ice. A toe goes in, a knee, a tongue soaked numb. I am flexible as the neck of the vulture bending down. I pick apart this body so that my son may know his own body whole. The skinned eyelids watch the blood drain from floors as clean as obedience. I will not feed my son my suicide. Our bees of Notre Dame. Things that cannot fall, fall. Sacred chalices, vials of saintly blood, millennia of faith and refuge, keyholes. When the spire slips like a tongue from a half-believed utterance, the nave swallows itself whole, then belches up brick dust and charred eulogies. Jeer sharp sparks swarm over the crowd, swirling even now, so that as we return to the courtyard, a thorny shadow of ridicule sticks to our souls. Until an old woman says, "A swarm overtook his face, but left no sting in the mouth of Saint Ambrose, our patron saint of bees." At this, the eyes of the skull snap open, wax octagons unmelted, unblurred. No sting, but a drop of honey on the tongue, the sweetness of oratory. As though by witchery, a black swath of soot lightens into a finesse of fouillard, lifts a hum in each thread, not black then, but gold, a stitchery of bees, each pinpointing a higher plane. Like rosary beads, a young nun whispers and counts each bee 50 times. The crone points higher. There are more, she says. And indeed, they are everywhere, rising from rooftops, from humble boxes, flowers offering altar wine, beekeepers climbing hidden stairs, and they, in their softness, rising and wrapping the air in the holy cloth of flight. This morning, a glisten of wings hangs on the air, a prayer for a city of hives. Thank you.
Wow, Caprice, thank you so much. First and foremost, the delivery, the performance of your work is astounding alone. I think a lot of people, I don't know, but as an outside observer, it seems that there are some people who just deliver their poems in their own way, and I think that's excellent. Some people fall into a trap of reading like they think a poet should, but you're really fearless. You just came out and projected these words as though you were in a room full of people, and I think that really added so much to the work, which in itself was wonderful. The I'm going to maybe make up a word. I'm going to say the vividness of the images you choose is startling, and I'm trying to sort of organize my thoughts around it. I had a fairly intense emotional experience, but it's wonderfully done in the sense that it is, in some cases, almost as if you're talking about everything around something that leaves the shape of that emotion that we're meant to feel. And I think someone just said in the chat, like, I feel like I need to read them twice. It's like, I feel like I need to sit down and like go through, but I guess the first poem, struck me instantly from the form of personal awareness about what the American government is doing, things of that nature, and the idea of parent-child relationships in these extremely difficult and unnecessary oppressive circumstances. Was that a poem that you, did something specific inspire it, or is it just sort of meditating on what you've been reading about going on in the country?
That particular poem came from just the pain that I felt in thinking of what it would be to be separated from a loved one. It's almost unbearable. So I had to write a poem.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, the lasting image that really sort of hangs there is the child looking to the mother's eyes for escape, freedom, flight. And it's sort of like the idea of being that powerless as a parent to not be able to fix things. I can imagine, just needing to not get it out, but find a way to talk about it. I think that's kind of thing back, with Deirdre's work as well, these difficult life things. It's not about releasing and eliminating these feelings. It's about finding a way to express them in a way that lets us have a discussion and lets us put our fingers on what is so difficult about it, right?
Well, thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you so much. So everyone, capricecarvin.com. And if you have more things coming up, please let us know. We will happily pass them along to everybody. That was wonderful. So
Thank you so much.
Sure. All right. Our next and actually final reader. We're moving briskly tonight. Some nights it's we end 15 minutes late. Sometimes it's 5 minutes early. It's all good, is what I would say. Time is both a flat circle and made up, so we're fine. All right. Our next reader is Melissa Scholes Young. She is the author of the novel Flood, winner of the literary fiction category for the 2017 Best Book Award from American Book Fest. Her second novel, The Hive, will be published in 2021. She's a contributing editor for Fiction Writers Review and editor of 2 volumes of DC women writers, Grace in Darkness, 2018, and Furious Gravity, 2020. Scholes Young was named a Breadloaf Camargo Fellow and a Quarry Farm Fellow at the Center for Mark Twain Studies. She's an associate professor in the Department of Literature at American University in Washington, D.C. Melissa, you can unmute yourself and take it away.
Thank you, Ridge. Thank you for that introduction. This is such a great Friday night. This is blowing my mind. I have a house full of dogs and teenagers, and I'm just so happy to be with you all right now. And the work has been incredible. Thank you, Ridge, for hosting, and Trina for inviting me, and Noli, who I love forever. I also have to give a shout out because I see Tara Campbell and Jessica in the audience as well, and they are both writers from the DC area who contributed to the anthologies that I edit. So I'm honored to have them in the audience as well. It's a great community here in DC. And because we have a little time, I actually brought 2 things to share tonight, 2 very, very different things. So if you don't like one, just pretend you like the other. You'll have a variety of work to choose from tonight. The first is a excerpt from a short story that's a standalone that's getting, it's called Scrap Metal Baby, and it's being published by Summer Camp Publishing. And I know that this audience has a lot of writers who are big fans of small presses, and Summer Camp Publishing just launched. And so I'm super honored and excited to be a part of their first class of authors. And Scrap Metal Baby has a special place in my heart, and it was a very difficult story to write, and it's a difficult story to read. So I'm just going to read to you from the beginning of it. And if you're not scared away, go to Summer Camp Publishing. You don't have to buy my book at all, but buy a book from Summer Camp Publishing so that we're supporting new presses. Scrap Metal Baby is a story that's about, it's a surreal story that's about the pieces that we're all made of, and parents who were not expecting a special needs child, and how we react to difference, really. And it's also a story that's about loving something that hurts you. And if any of us have ever loved something, then we know what that feels like. Scrap Metal Baby likes her mama's milk best. It fills her hollow tin stomach and pools in the corners of her hinged mouth. White foam laced with gasoline and a hint of motor oil. Watching the greasy mixture drip down the front of her shirt shocked Mama at first. The doctor said her body would adjust, and it has. Mama's breasts bear tiny, clean scars and fresh cuts from the baby's mouth. Miniature white leashes in a crisscross pattern swim against her pale skin. Mama winces as the baby kneads the breast with her corrugated phalanges. We've got to get you on transfusion oil again, Shelby, Mama says. I need some sleep in a bad way. Mama rubs her eyes and yawns. She leans back into her rocking chair. Shelby releases a burp, which perfumes the air with the dull scent of old oil. Her engine's low rumble transitions to a satisfied purr. Then she curls her sharp cheek in Mama's arms, and the metallic slits of her eyes snap shut. Mama sighs and holds Shelby close, grateful for the moment when this love doesn't damage her. When Mama and Daddy learned that they were to have a scrap metal baby, they met the news mostly with silence. They stared at each other, waiting for the other to react. But what does that mean? Daddy's words came out in a stammer. I don't get it. Well, it means your child is special, the doctor said. She seems to have grown completely from parts of something else. Metal parts, spare parts, parts from each of you. She's extremely rare, 1 in 10 million. He collected pamphlets from a drawer beneath the examination table. They were labeled Your Special Needs Child and Coping with Rare Disorders in block letters without pictures. There are books you can order, manuals which will explain the procedures and such. Scrap metal babies are extremely rare, but there are a few others, the doctor explained. Mama looked at the pamphlets on the wall of fat, smiling babies and wanted to take those too. The pamphlets and baby belly filled Mama's lap. I don't understand, she said. Did I do something wrong? Of course not. An anomaly like this isn't anyone's fault. We don't know why the baby turned out like this. She just did. Let's look at the ultrasound. Do you see the places that emit light? The doctor held up a series of pictures with neon outlines of a baby. Glowing limbs and fingers were suspended against black. Your baby doesn't have any bones. See the little engine there? She's made entirely of scrap metal. That's why the parts look like they're on fire. Will she live? Daddy asked. His voice broke and he looked at his hands. For a while. We don't know how long. There may be complications as she grows. She'll need replacement parts, tune-ups, oil changes. Other scrap metal babies have lived for a few years. One lived into her teens. The problem is usually the engines. They aren't meant to run continuously like a body needs. It's a lot to process. It does explain why this pregnancy has been so uncomfortable, the doctor said. Mama rubbed her hands over her bulging stomach, poking at her own plumpness in search of the angular body that glowed so rigid on the ultrasound. She'd always loved the pudgy creases of baby wrists and how the fat overflowed in wrinkles. And then? What happens when the engine goes out? That's beyond my specialty, I'm afraid, but I will recommend a pediatrician with this kind of expertise. Mama thought of the baby swimming inside her, the aluminum pressing against her ribs, the fluttered feeling that tickled her, the sharp jabs that woke her at night. How will she come out? Mama asked. It will be a cesarean delivery. It's the only safe way. I'm assembling a team. Other experts will want to be present. You'll have so much support, the doctor replied. Let's get you scheduled. A baby this big might come out early. I hate to leave you hanging, but that's where I'm going to pause in that part of the reading. So if you're not completely creeped out by a scrap metal baby, I'm kind of in love with her. I love this idea that we are all made of parts of other people, and to make it really an actual thing was a challenge for me. And like I said, if you've ever loved something that is meant to hurt you, you might enjoy this story. Like I said, you don't have to buy my book, but go to Summer Camp Publishing and support this brand new indie press that I'm super excited about. And the next excerpt I'm going to share with you is from my new novel. It's called The Hive. And this is much closer to, if you've read or heard of my novels, this is much closer to the work I do in novel writing. The Hive is a story that's about the Feller family's survival. And I wrote this story about a year ago about this rural Missouri pest control family. And I wrote it about a mother who's obsessed with preparing for the apocalypse. I wrote it about a year ago, and I had no idea how timely it would actually become, and that her prepper skills would suddenly actually seem pretty reasonable and rational. But the story is really about the survival of this family. In 2008, it's set against the recession, the backdrop of the recession in our country, and leading up to the election of Obama, and the way that middle America was grappling with the recession, and the way that also the election of Obama changed the family business structure. So it's sort of, there's also 4 sisters, and they're the ones who have to figure out how to take over the family business and how to survive together. So it's like Little Women, but with bed bugs and bees. So this is actually just a very short excerpt from the beginning of The Hive. It was mid-July on a sweltering summer Missouri afternoon, and the sun couldn't find a single cloud to hide behind. Waterfowls ducked beneath the river's surface, and whippoorwills sang their melancholy from the lush trees waving above. The air stank of soil and algae mixed with coconut sunscreen. The muddy water of the Mississippi River wasn't worried with the Feller family's survival, but the sisters were. Sunshine baked the wooden dock and kissed the Feller sisters' freckles. Just as they had the summer before, and the one before that one too, the sisters wore bikinis. Faded tops and bottoms passed down and among them. The river assaulted the elastic and faded the floral colors, but still, swim campwear endured. It came too close for me, Daisy said, dangling her legs off the dock. We almost lost everything. She flexed her feet in the sticky air, and a rotten piece of debris hung from her pinky toe. Daisy shook it off, and the current swept it away. Everything that mattered, anyway. It was never that close, Maggie insisted. She swatted a mosquito on Daisy's thigh, leaving a thin trail of crimson bug blood. Besides, nobody would want this old fishing camp. It's a mess. But it's our mess, Kate said, looking up and down her row of sisters. It was too close for Mom, Jules added. She was itching to be done with it all. The family business and the business of the family. All of it. At least we're still together, Maggie said. That's what Dad cared about. The sisters agreed, sipping green glass bottles of soda, but they'd never know the true feelings of their father. 1 year ago, they'd sat on this same dock, months before their family broke, and they were left with only the fragments of the whole they'd once been. Now they were making their first camp trip solo as sisters. They were still sorting out who brought what and how the family worked now. Jules dove into the brown water alone and waded her way back up. Maggie and Daisy held hands, nudging each other's hips, and jumped off the dock together. Kate ran at her grown sisters, waited for the absence of her parents' voices to call after them, and belly flopped in the middle with a splash. The Feller family fish camp had been handed down for 3 generations, a burden both beloved and neglected. It was a simple single wide trailer on stilts, with panels that had maybe once been painted white. The camp sat at the meeting of the mighty Mississippi and the Ohio River on the lap of Fort Defiance Park. Robbie, their dad, liked to remind them all that it was once called Camp Defiance during the Civil War and commanded by General Ulysses S. Grant. Jules would roll her eyes and tell him that glorifying a war fought for slavery was terrible. But before they could begin bantering about erasing history versus righting historical wrongs, Grace, their mother, would hold up her hands and say, "Enough." By the time they loaded the car for these trips, Grace had made dozens of decisions. She sought a truce, even if it wouldn't hold. The trailer's living room and kitchen combination reeked of stale catfish and bitter beer. The 2 miniature bedrooms housed 4 sets of built-in bed bunks with narrow strips of peeling, dingy vinyl between the lofts. Still, the Fellers ran to camp most summers and squeezed in a few fall trips before the chill arrived and the leaves crisped in the Missouri Valley. At camp, the sisters learned to bait hooks, pull fish traps from the muck, and dig burrs out of their bare feet. They knew which bunks were theirs because they'd carved their names in the frame as a tradition on their 5th birthday. On their annual inaugural trip, as spring rounded the corner into summer, Grace cut a notch in the wooden stairs to measure her daughter's growth. She added their initials and the date while the sisters raced ahead, peeling off Catholic school uniforms and pulling on mishmash swimsuit pieces from a communal wicker basket before jumping off the dock into the cool relief of the muddy water. The family dogs chased them, cautioning their courage with a bark and cheering on their unleashed animal freedom. The promise of the camp brought hope. It lifted the family's spirits to pile in the car after the last day of school and travel toward the water. Each trip, the Feller family wished they would roast marshmallows for s'mores and finally catch fireflies without fighting over which sister had more. They would leave the family pest control business behind and not talk about how to cover the quarterly tax bill or whether they should pay for their employees' cell phones. But first, they had to drive the 46 miles from Cape Girardeau, Missouri to Cairo, Illinois, snaking the Mississippi River's gritty coast to put in the boat. Each trip, Robbie insisted they coordinate bathroom breaks for the drive, but they had to stop at least twice. Even as they grew from children to teens to young adults, their trips were the same. Maggie would say they should have checked the road conditions. Jules got carsick. Someone else would say planning took away from the adventure, probably Daisy. Kate didn't say much. She was lost in her own thoughts and passed around their mom's latest creation of homemade granola bars. The brindle pit bull Nacho would whine from the back seat and lick their hands for crumbs. Robbie promised if they could all just hold it, they'd be cooking hot dogs over a fire in time for supper. But they usually settled for grilled cheese sandwiches on the dock as the sun set. Nacho ran after the bunnies in the bushes, hoping to find his own dinner, relieved to be released from the car. Who knew which family camp trip would be the one they'd remember the most? The pieces of the weekends and the years might add up to an entirely different story. Maybe they'd each remember separate parts, or the same ones in a different pattern. Perhaps as grief and joy intersected, they'd learn the whole mattered more than the portions. Nacho could have told him that. Dogs know that the only moment that matters is this one. I'll stop there. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Melissa. That was excellent. It's really interesting because those two are very different, obviously. No, it's good because they're both very different ways of getting at some very real emotional experiences. One through the depiction of all these, the second one through the depiction of all these details of really, how do I put it? Specific details that maybe alone wouldn't mean as much, but slowly you get a picture of this family and how they run and how they operate just from these little details. And then the first one, obviously, I was thinking, you mentioned, you referred to it as surreal. And I was thinking about, there's sort of a line drawn a lot of times between, there's like surreal, magical realism, then there's like, your science fiction, which is more popular, maybe has more robots, I don't know. But all of those styles that involve things that are absolutely not real are once again talking about something very real. So in the case of your story, that is a profoundly moving way to talk about the experience parents might have from getting test results without just directly talking about it. I noticed as I was thinking while you were reading, I noticed that sort of became accidentally the theme tonight, is everyone sort of non-literally spoke about what they were speaking about. Maybe I'm just like silly and it turns out metaphor is common in writing. I don't know. But I guess what I would ask you just before I sort of wrap things up or let you go is there a conscious decision with a longer piece to make it more sort of reality based, or is the more surreal end of things something you'd like to explore in a longer form?
That's a great question. And I do think, especially the readings we've heard tonight, writers always have their ear to the ground. And I think we're always writing about themes long before they actually become in our world, whether it's surreal or real. I noticed that in so much of the work tonight as well. And I don't usually go into a piece, an idea, with any understanding of where it's going to go. I usually write the piece that just is bothering me every day until I write it down, and otherwise I can't quite capture it. I always knew Scrap Metal Baby would be a short story, and I've always known that I was actually a novelist because my stories tend to just get longer and I have more to say. Scrap Metal Baby is really done, and it really just is a standalone. And I was honored when Summer Camp Publishing decided they wanted to just publish it as a standalone, because I couldn't, honestly, as a person and as a parent, I couldn't have written it as a novel. I don't have what it takes to spend more than 30 pages in this story.
Sure. Yeah,
and
it's
to, I think,
intense.
to have that intensity and to be able to sustain it. And it's a difficult story to read in its entirety and out loud to a lovely audience like this. So I think it works best in small doses. And with The Hive, with the novel, I mean, the minute I was done, I was at 400 pages and I just decided, well, this has to end somewhere. And I'm already working on the book that is the next piece of it.
Okay. Wow. So,
it's just a story that keeps growing.
Yeah. So
that intrigues me.
Yeah. The answer seems like it strikes me that some of what you're saying is, that you can afford the intensity in a smaller period. Whereas, if you were to write, say, a series of 3 novels that were about this metaphorical baby's birth, life, and slow decline, that'd be rough for everyone. That'd be rough on you to write. It'd be hard on the editor. It'd be hard on the reader. And I don't mean that in necessarily that means it shouldn't happen, but I can see why, if you can get the same emotional response from just the 30 pages, that sort of makes more sense. So that's excellent. All right. Well, we will all, I think, be running to purchase a copy of that to find out more about it. And everyone tonight, you know, your work has been so wonderful. Thank you all for sharing it with us. Like, this is, I was telling Trina before we started at like 6:45. I usually am sitting on the couch going like, oh, I just want to watch a movie or something or whatever. And then I get like 10 minutes in and I'm just like, this is the best thing we do. This is the best part of the week. This is the best way to meet these really interesting people. And I feel extremely lucky that I get to react in real time and attempt my very best to be present with these writers, because it's such a source of wisdom and interest for me. So first of all, personally, thank you. As a whole, our enterprise thanks you. And with that, I think what we're going to do is we will stop recording. Anyone who would like to hang around, we're going to hang out for about an hour after the reading, audience included. If anyone has questions for anybody wants to network, anybody, I'm still hoping one day we manage to get like an agent or publisher who comes in here by accident, and then we can just be like, hey, we need to introduce you to all of these people. Oh, thank you very much, Juliet. I appreciate it. What I was going to say about my ability is I love this because I haven't gotten to do this since college. Talk about ideas, books, poems, etc. So this is like, it's very self-indulgent, if I'm honest. I appreciate that you think I say something cogent. All right, I'm going to end the recording, and then I lost the